Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to provide a quick update on how my Monzo investment account is performing. I've been investing £100 a month in their Ventures Fund since November 2023, and this video marks halfway through this year, halfway through 2024. So far this year, it's been largely good for stock market investors, and particularly good for those who invest in the US stock market, as the S&P 500 closed the first half of the year 14% higher than it started. It's worth mentioning that most of these gains have come from a select few companies, with over 60% of those gains coming from 5 specific companies in Nvidia, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, and Apple. And within that, 30% came from Nvidia alone. Some investors may have concerns over the concentration of gains from a few select companies, but for me personally, as an investor in Monzo's Ventures Fund, I'm not too bothered about which companies drive the growth in the fund and how concentrated the growth is. I'm just concerned that the growth happens. In terms of how it happens, I'm not too bothered. The beauty of investing in a fund like the Ventures Fund is that you don't need to worry about picking a specific company you feel will do well. Instead, you get exposure to thousands of companies around the world. How I see investing in world funds like this is similar to how I see football squads. Instead of needing to take all the risk in backing one star player in a football team to do well, you back the whole squad. This means if one player doesn't do well, there are others who can pick up the slack. The same goes for investment funds. If some companies don't do well in that fund, there are other companies which can pick up the slack and which will do well. And this passive approach works for me personally and my own risk appetite. But of course, there are some people who do pick individual stocks and do incredibly well, much better than me in terms of performance. It's important to remember that everyone's investing risk appetite and needs are different, and because of that, different approaches work for different people. Nonetheless, the first half of this year has been good for most investors of all different styles. This month particularly has been good for investors in the US stock market, as the S&P 500 is up by 4.64%, which is incredibly good performance. And I'm hoping some of these gains from the American stock market are reflected in my own portfolio. So let's bring up Monzo's app and see how my portfolio is getting on. We can see that my portfolio is now worth £1,084, with £311 of that in the Stock and Shares ISA and £773 in my general investment account. In terms of performance, my portfolio is up overall by 8.44% in percentage terms and £84.41 in pound terms. We can see using the graph feature here that this month has been good for my portfolio. I'm up. We can look at the start date and end date for this month using the graph to see how much I am up exactly and what percentage I'm up by. I wish Monzo would provide this feature, this functionality of showing the performance on a monthly basis, but until they do so, let's carry on doing it manually on this video. Hopefully one day we'll have the functionality ready-made for us like many other investment platforms. We can see at the start of the month, my portfolio was worth £950, and then it ended the month as of today at a value of £1,084. So there's an increase there of £134 across the last month. And of that, £100 came from my monthly top up, which came in around the 11th of June. And the remaining £34 came from an increase in the value of the fund. So an increase in the value of the stocks and shares within the Ventures Fund. So overall, my portfolio is up by £34 in terms of increase in the value of the fund, which equates to just over 3% of the total value of my portfolio. So over the last month, my portfolio is up by over 3% in percentage terms, which I'm happy with. It's good performance. If we zoom out to see the portfolio's overall performance since I started investing in it using the all-time button here, we can see the portfolio's had steady growth since I opened it. Nothing spectacular, but steady. I'm not expecting all months to follow this steady trend, as history suggests there'll be bad months along the journey. In the long term, history suggests that the market trend is upwards, but in the short term, history suggests there'll be blips along the way, and by blips I mean downward performance. I've only invested in this fund in a short term period. I've only invested in this fund since November last year, which is less than a year. And I've been incredibly lucky that during that period, the stock market has done relatively well. This is mainly thanks to AI-driven growth in terms of AI hype of certain companies, and the performance of the top US tech companies. As we mentioned at the start of the video, most of the growth in the US stock market, the S&P 500, has been driven by 5 select tech companies. And I've benefited from this in terms of this specific fund, as the Adventurous Fund is 100% invested in equities, in stocks and shares, and most of those equities are US equities. So of course, the performance of the US stock market and those select companies will have benefited the performance of the Adventurous Fund. And hopefully this good performance continues into the second half of the year. Let me know how your Monzo funds are performing, and if you want to find out what I think will happen to a key US stock, which is driving a lot of the growth at the moment in the US stock market, and a lot of the growth in my own Adventurous Fund, then I have a video around here going through what I think will happen to Nvidia's stock price in the future. But for this video, thanks for watching.